Everybody knows Yummy's story. They've heard all about that fateful day when Yummy, just 11 years old, shot 3 teenagers, first approaching a 15-year-old he recognized from the neighborhood and shooting him after asking what gang he was with, and then the fatal drive-by that took the life of young Siobhan Dean while also hitting a teenage boy from a rival gang. But what everybody doesn't know is that wasn't Yummy's first time on a drill, nor was his story unique. At that time in Chicago, kids as young as 9 were being leaned on by older guys to do things. The older guys were once younger guys, and they knew from past experiences that minors got a slap on the wrist for crimes. It started out with robberies and drug deliveries or sales, but eventually the streets of Chicago was crawling with baby gangsters that were essentially child soldiers like that of a war-torn country in Africa or Asia. Kids wielding weapons, taking lives and losing them as well. The thing that made Yummy's story unique is that he was the subject of a citywide manhunt, with his face plastered all over the news when he died. But being under 15, carrying guns and committing other crimes had become a normal thing after the crack epidemic hit the city in the late 80s or yes. By the early 90s, the older members had lil homies doing all the real dirt. The big homies had lil homies, and the lil homies had littler homies. The same year Yummy lost his life, a 5-year-old named Eric Morse met the same fate at the hands of 2 11-year-olds because he wouldn't steal them candy. One of the 11-year-olds had already been arrested for multiple burglaries and a shooting in which no one was hurt. So punishing someone younger than you for not following an order wasn't some crazy thought those boys came up with on their own. It was their reality. They had to do bad things for older guys that they didn't want to do. So how could this 5-year-old tell them no and then go tell on them? He had to pay. It was the law of the land. The same laws turned Yummy into a pint-sized soldier, and his first mission in combat wasn't the tragic day he's remembered for. A few months before the death of Siobhan, Yummy was summoned to a house in the Hunnits, 108th to be exact. This block was the headquarters for the 8-Ball faction of the Black Disciples. Yummy has been here several times before. Generally, it meant he'd be making a little money and impressing the older guys, so he was in a good mood for once. Yummy pulled up to the house on his stolen bike dressed in oversized clothes. In the yard was an older member we'll call KK. He was the money man. Every time he needed Yummy, it resulted in money being made. Sometimes he'd need a car stolen. Sometimes he'd need a small body to be lifted up into a window so they could get inside and open the door for a burglary. But not today. A rival gang had encroached on 8-Ball's territory a day after a double shooting, and the 8-Balls weren't sure who did it. The area was flooded with gangs. Lords, Stones, BDs, GDs, Breeds, MCs were all about a half a block apart, and a GD set just so happened to creep on the turf the day after it got drilled. KK didn't take this as a coincidence, and it wasn't. But the gangster disciples hadn't done the shooting. They just figured since the main 2 guys that wouldn't allow them to sell in that spot were laid up in a hospital, that they could make some money for a few days while they were recovering. But KK saw it as a threat. "Ooh, check it out." KK yelled into the house from the front porch. "Yeah, you," replied a reputable 16-year-old member known as Crazy C. He was out on bond for an attempted murder and was suspected in several others. And a few months from now, Crazy C's name would ring bells nationally. Crazy C was none other than Craig Hardaway, the teen who would later be convicted of Yummy's murder. "Let me get that thing off you," KK said to Crazy C. C froze with a look of disappointment on his face. "But this my baby right here. It's other ones in the crib, big bruh." "Nah, that one gotta go. Too dirty, so I'm finna use it this last time and get rid of it." If you couldn't tell, the two were going back and forth over a weapon. A gun the gang had used many times over for many crimes. And today, Yummy would use it one final time. The idea behind using Yummy was his size. There was plenty of other young members he could have used, but he felt Yummy was small enough to walk up to the crowd without them dispersing. Yummy had to be the smallest active gang member in history. He was unusually small for his age. Although he was 11, he could probably pass for an 8-year-old, so even with baby soldiers terrorizing the streets, no one would see him coming and think he's a threat. KK, Craig, and Yummy stood in the front yard and went over the plan. Yummy was to walk up to the group of gangster disciples and say he had a message for Twin. "Who is Twin?" Yummy asked. "Hell if I know, it's just a distraction." The three guys walked to the corner of 108th and Drexel so they could point out exactly who they wanted. But the crowd of 8 GDs had dwindled down to 2 guys, one on each end of the street. It appears they came deep to show strength and make sure there wouldn't be any issues. After a couple hours, Baby Rob, a reputable shot caller for all GD sets in the 100s, picked 2 shorties to hold the block down while everyone else went about their daily business. Although he knew it was risky, he wasn't worried because this wasn't a hostile takeover, just a quick money grab while the BDs recuperated. There was no ongoing war between the 2 factions, and he instructed the shorties to back down and get out of there at the first sign of trouble. The problem was 2 16-year-olds with guns on them didn't see a 4'6" kid as a sign of trouble. And that's what KK wanted. As KK studied the 2 GDs on their block, he couldn't tell who they were, so he didn't care which one Yummy took out. He turns to Yummy and tells him forget the original plan. They ain't deep as they was earlier, so you should be able to walk right up on them and blam them. And don't come back here. Hit the alley and go to 107th. Play it smooth. We'll be over there waiting in the Buick. You about to be moving up, Lil Yummy? Don't let me down, Lil Bro. Yummy had been a bit nervous when he first held the gun in his hand. The weight of it made everything feel surreal. But any trepidation he may have felt went away when KK told him he'd be moving up in the gang. What really sealed it for Yummy was when he said, "Don't let me down, Lil Bro." Yummy was a gangster, but he was still a kid. Someone you looked up to putting that type of faith in you gives you courage. A sense of belief he didn't have in himself had been awakened. Yummy wanted to make KK proud. As Yummy walked down 108th, he had little fear. Rather he knew it or not, he yearned for love, for a father figure, for discipline. Unfortunately for him, that came in the form of the gang and 22-year-old KK. The only thing on his mind was not letting KK down. That meant more than anything. And it was an added bonus that a guy like Crazy C was around to witness it. Yummy was familiar with his work. He had been in the juvenile detention center with Crazy C before. Crazy C was the type of member Yummy modeled himself after. He didn't have the self-confidence to believe he could be like KK. KK was a leader, smart, and very strategic. At such a young age, Yummy couldn't envision himself being the boss in control of a set. But Crazy C was a known shooter feared throughout the Hoonids. That was something Yummy could be. On the nearest corner was a 16-year-old gangster disciple known as Poonie, a nickname given to him by his family. Poonie was originally from the north side. He grew up in Cabrini Green housing projects and had only been in the neighborhood for a month. Much like Yummy, he wanted to impress Baby Rob and the guys. He had already made enough money to go back on the GD's turf that was block over and 2 streets up, but he still had more work and he really wanted Baby Rob to respect him, so he decided to hang out a little longer and make more money for Rob. Not only would he be in Rob's good graces, but he's up in his cut with every sale. Out of nowhere, Poonie felt a frightening sense of dread. He stood up and put his hands on his gun. He looked around frantically, realizing he was now the only gangster disciple left. That's exactly what he meant by earning his respect. The other guy, who he barely knew, had left without saying anything to him. That would never happen in Cabrini Green. War or not, leaving one of the guys alone in another gang's hood meant he wasn't really one of the guys. As he panned the block, all he saw was a couple potential customers and a woman and her kid. He had a clear shot of the alley across the street. Nothing alarming. He figured he was just spooked because he had subconsciously realized he was by himself. But he told himself nobody knew him because he wasn't from the area. He didn't go to a school that everybody from the area went to, so nobody knew him to have beef with him. He relaxed a little and leaned back on the wall, He was going to finish selling his pack and go back to his new hood with his chest out. Just then, that lady with the kid approached. She didn't say anything, just held out a $10 bill. Poonie snatched it and snarled, "With your kid? Man, you bogus as hell." The lady took the bag and said, "I don't know this lil nigga. He just asked me what time it was." The lady walked off with her baggie, and Poonie turned his attention to the boy left standing there. They stared at each other. The kid looked angry. Poonie was nervous about going to another hood store, so he figured he'd send the little guy for him and tell him to get himself something too. As Poonie pulls out a wad of cash, the boy speaks. Where you from? A bit caught off guard, Poonie looks up to reply and is staring down the barrel of a .380 revolver. The boy was Yummy Sandifer. Before Poonie can say anything, Yummy didn't stay to watch the body drop. He ran down the same alley Poonie had just been keeping an eye on to make sure no one ambushed him. As Yummy reached 107th, sure enough, KK and C were waiting for him in the Buick Regal KK drove. But Yummy decided to change plans mid-drill. He kept running through the alley another block over to 106th. That's where his grandmother's house was. It was maybe a mile down, but Yummy was full of adrenaline and ran for about 10 minutes straight until he got there. He ran to his room and pulled a shoebox out from under his bed. He took the lid off. Inside were remnants of the child he used to be. A Nintendo Game Boy that was broken, some baseball cards, an orange toy cap gun, and some pogs. Yummy removes the toy gun and puts the .380 he'd just used in the box and tucked it back under the bed. Predictably, Yummy had a fascination with guns. This was not his first time holding a gun, but this was different. The power that gun gave him, he never wanted to give up. He'd heard the conversation earlier about getting rid of the gun after the drill. Yummy wasn't going to let that happen. That gun was his now. Back on 107th, when Yummy kept running, KK circled around to 108th to see what had happened. He figured Yummy would mess it up. No matter how advanced he was in the streets, he was still just a kid, but he was wrong. The boy had did the deed. Looks like we got us a secret weapon.
On King David Shorty.
Back on 106th, Yummy was looking for another bike to steal to get back to the spot on 108th. Before that could happen, KK pulled up with Crazy C and 2 other guys with him. Get in. Yummy climbed in the back seat in between the older teens he recognized from being at the house on 108th. How you feeling? You okay? How was it?
I want to do it again.
The car erupted with laughter. You cold-hearted Lil Yummy, I like that. You got that heat.
No, I had to throw it in the dumpster. I thought I was being chased.
Yummy had already come up with a lie. He had no intentions on returning that gun. I hope you wiped it down. Ain't nobody prints on it but yours.
Fasho, big bro, we good. Can I get my ink now?
KK looked around the car. Everybody nodded in agreement. Yeah, little nigga, you can get the set tatted. I got big plans for you, Yummy. You my little superstar.